So let's start with the willpower muscle. What is willpower? Scientists have looked into willpower over the last 20 years or so and understood through the advent of fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging technology, that our willpower sits in what they call the prefrontal cortex area of our brain, which is situated right here, marked in red in this picture. And it is in that particular area of the brain that controls what we do and what we don't do. In fact, it controls all these functions: long-term planning, complex problem analysis and solving, situational assessment, emotional integration, motivation, short-term memory, working memories they call it, attention management, a host of functions, all which scientists call the executive function of our brain, sitting right here. What neuroscientists in the last 5 years or so have also been able to identify an area of the brain called, a mouthful, the orbital frontal cortex, which is an area sitting right on top of our eye sockets. And it is that area that actually directly within the prefrontal cortex controls what we do and what we don't do. The left side of the orbitofrontal cortex is responsible for initiating action, and the right side is responsible for inhibiting action. So how can we control our willpower? Can we control our willpower? Can we use it to improve our lot in life, as scientists tell us that we can? And so Professor Roy Baumeister is the foremost leader in the area of willpower out of the University of Florida State. And he's done for the last 20 years a lot of research in this area. And he tells us two main things about willpower. Number one, willpower is a depletable resource. We have a certain amount of it in the morning where we are fresh after a good night's sleep and a healthy breakfast. And over time, that resource depletes. So towards the evening hours, we have a lot less of it. The second thing is that if we exercise that willpower muscle and keep it fit at all times, it actually comes to serve us and to help us in better control our lives and apply a higher degree of rational thinking, which is brought along by the prefrontal cortex, over our emotional reactions to whatever situations life presents us with. So let's look at those two factors. This is an interesting study that was conducted in Israel, where the researchers looked at the rulings of a parole board over a period of 10 months and about 1,100 different rulings that that particular board did over that period. And what they found is that the rate at which the board awarded the paroles to those prisoners, first thing in the morning, was about 70%. Then it started going down, irrespective of the case and the merits of the case, to about 0 just before the morning break. And after they had their coffee and 15-minute break and perhaps something to eat, it shot back to 65% or so, and again down to almost 0 towards lunchtime. And researchers, those Israeli researchers, as well as Roy Baumeister and others, have looked at why is it so? What is happening in the brains of those judges that is influencing their decisions over any other factors? And it's just the luck of the draw of the prisoner where he came in the stake first thing in the morning or first thing after the morning break, or just before lunchtime, in which he might spend another 5 years in prison. So what they found is that those deliberations and decision makings that those judges had to perform require a lot of mental energy. And the brain derives its energy from glucose. It does not store energy in its own right. Like other parts of our body, we have the fat available to us. The brain only gets its energy through the glucose that comes with the blood flow. With the passage of time, the level of glucose drops, and the mental energies available to us to perform highly complex mental tasks, like those judges had to do, is depleted. So what do we learn from that? We learn from that we have to be very mindful of situations where we're tasking our brain with critical decision making, critical analysis, critical negotiations, to not do those kinds of things and plan for those kinds of decision makings at a time when we know our mental energies will be depleted. And in fact, the Japanese use this very same knowledge in their negotiating techniques. They will get their guests from the US or wherever else into a room, close the door and say, gentlemen, we're not leaving this room until we're reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, the Japanese will sneak out of the room, one by one, quietly, take a 10-minute break, have a coffee, have something to eat, and come back to the room. But the guests, no. They had to sit there throughout hours and hours and hours of negotiation until their mental energies were completely depleted, and at that time, the Japanese knew that they had the upper hand. So the lesson here for us at the individual level as well as the organizational level, plan your activities based on this particular knowledge of how our brain behaves and how our willpower is so dependent on the energy level of our brain. And the second one is that the willpower is just like a muscle. It can be developed and kept fit. And those are the 5 interventions that we can take to help us keep a fit willpower. The first 4 are obvious. Sleeping well, reducing the stress level, exercising, and a healthy diet. But it is this last one, exercising the willpower, which I'd like to discuss with you a little bit. And how this works is as follows. You take simple tasks as a challenge that you know you stand a fairly high chance of mastering them and habitualizing them. And you practice them for a period of time until they become completely automatic. And then you go to the next one and the next one. And that exercise of challenging yourself with those kinds of exercises will improve the fitness of your willpower. So for example, the first thing I've done after I read this research was to move the mouse on my computer to the left hand. Initially, it was very awkward for about the first 2 weeks, and I always wanted to pull it apart and bring it back to where it belongs. But after a while, I mastered it. The next thing I did is started brushing my teeth with my left hand. I don't know if you've tried, my non-dominant hand. And at the beginning, again, it was awkward, and I would hit my gums in all directions, and I will hurt myself. But after a while, I mastered this one as well. And then I took on dishwashing with my left hand. It cost us a couple of plates, but it worked in the end. The last one I've tried, this one is a little more risky, is shaving with my non-dominant hand. In the beginning, I had some bloody accidents. But this morning, as you can see, I shaved with my left hand and my face is still intact. So the idea here is select your simple exercises that you know you stand a high chance with good practice and dedication to master, and then be on target, focus on them for a period of time until they become a habit. So how can we do this at the organizational level? So let's say, for example, you want your team to not exceed 50 words in their emails. Because as you well know, some of us tend to write War and Peace in our emails. So you institute this new habit, publicize it amongst your team, ask them to practice this on a regular basis. The social pressure of the team itself will also help. And after a while, if you maintain sufficient focus on this, you'll start noticing that the team is beginning to master this new behavior. Similarly, if you want your team to not hit reply all, but just reply the individual that they intend to receive the reply message, same thing. Or in fact, any other habit that you would like the team to master. And after doing this, habit after habit, you'll find that the willpower, self-discipline, focus, determination of your team is improving by the day.